What's going on, Chum Guzzlers? Welcome back to Bucket of Chum, the Shark Movie Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Captain Steve, and we are on week 2 of Octopus August. And of course, we are checking out Octopus 2, River of Fear from 2001, directed by Yossi Wien, or Wine. I don't know how to fucking pronounce that name. But yeah, so this is technically a sequel to last week's movie, quote unquote. I don't necessarily think I would call it that, but let's just get right into the letterbox plot synopsis. Above and below the water, there is no escape. Dead bodies are being found in New York Harbor. The police have no clues nor suspects until Nick and his colleague realize the killer is a giant octopus. Everybody, especially the police captain, refuses to believe Nick's story, and soon the harbor will be filled with boats for the 4th of July celebrations. Sounds a little bit like Jaws to me, but this has an average rating of 2.6 stars, which is higher than last week's movie, but last week's movie was also rated too high and was a pretty goddamn disappointment. Which brings me into our poster expectations. Again, I like this week's poster a lot. I actually think it's better than last week's poster. But, last week's movie being a disappointment, I'm going to try and lower my expectations just a little bit. But the poster is pretty cool. So it's just a woman wrapped in the tentacles from the octopus. So we can kind of see, the octopus's eye and mouth, in behind her. It's a really cool looking poster, actually. And I see this and I'm like, yeah, this is definitely something I would want to watch. But again, I'm kind of just expecting more of the same. Again, being a sequel to last week's movie, there's going to be some dumb B-plot that I really don't give a shit about that we're just going to follow along and try and force me to give a shit about, which I don't. Again, expecting a whole lot of cheesy CGI, not a whole lot of practical effects. So, yeah, I'm kind of just expecting more of the same. I'm not really holding out any hope for this movie to be spectacular by any means, so that's what I'm thinking going into it. And while I was looking this movie up on IMDb, there's one piece of trivia, so they call it, and I'm just going to read it out. Despite being released in January 2002, there are multiple shots clearly featuring the Twin Towers, including some focusing on them in a tour scene. I'm not sure if people know how movies work, but sometimes, they film them before they come out. So, this coming out in January 2002, they obviously filmed this in 2001, probably before September, I'm fucking guessing. But I don't understand why this is a piece of trivia. This is it's honestly just one of the dumbest things I've read, and it's literally the only piece of trivia on IMDb for this movie. But whoever submitted this might be kind of stupid and maybe not understanding how time and film and all of that shit works. But yes, we do see the Twin Towers in this movie because it was filmed before September 11th. Again, the Twin Towers are just kind of, or were a very prominent part of the New York skyline. So of course they're going to appear in shots in movies that were shot pre 9/11. But yeah, I don't know. That was just a really fucking dumb piece of trivia. And before we get into the plot of this movie, if you're enjoying the podcast and you would like to support the podcast, you can go to patreon.com/bucket of chum. Each month I'm doing an exclusive episode over there. This month I'm going to be taking a look at Tentacles from 1977 and 1978. If you can't do that, if you could just like and subscribe to the YouTube channel or leave a rating or review wherever you listen to the podcast, any and all of that is greatly appreciated. But now it's time to get our tentacles slimy and let's dive in. So right off, this movie starts with this drunk couple fucking around by the docks or whatever, and then the dude gets into a boat and the woman is telling him to get out of the boat, and he's just acting like a drunken fool. He keeps tripping over everything and whatnot. And then we see a tentacle eventually break through the bottom of this boat. It bashes him around and his partner screams, and she's eventually taken by a tentacle as well. All of this was practical tentacle work. So right when I just said my poster expectations, already I'm blown out of the water. I'm oh, we're starting off with practical tentacle effects. I'm that's a pretty good start. So already this is way better than Octopus. And I'm cautiously optimistic, very cautiously. But anyways, we then see two cops on a boat getting ready to take down some drug dealers or smugglers on another boat in this sneaky operation they're trying to do. So they get into the water with their scuba gear and they sneak up on the boat, and then they hold this man and woman at gunpoint and they start searching the boat for drugs, but they come up empty. And then they see this blinking light on the dashboard, and somebody says like, "Oh, it's just a fish finder," but the cops are like, "No, it's like a dive beacon or something," so they know that somebody's down below diving. So a couple of them go into the water and start searching around, and then they come across a diver and they bring him up to the surface, and then they find this freezer, and when they open it up, it's completely empty. So they think that the drugs are being dropped off in this freezer and they're picking them up. But then we go to the cop station in the morning, and so our two main guys here, Walter and Nick, from the dive that we just saw, they get called into the captain's office, and he starts reaming them out because apparently this boat belonged to a judge. So this guy that they took down was like a New York judge. But yeah, Nick was like, "No, I'm positive that like this was like a drug smuggling boat because I see it come in every Wednesday, and then by Thursday the streets are just filled with drugs or something." And I'm like, okay, I don't really know what kind of research you're doing on that, but sure, we'll go with that. The chief kind of reams them out again a little bit more, and then he just gives them an assignment. They're like, "Yeah, somebody's having electrical issues down by the harbor or dock, so go check that out." So then as they leave, Walter tells Nick that he's put in for a transfer for a desk job. He's kind of done with all the diving nonsense. So he's not going to be on harbor patrol anymore. And then they kind of go like back and forth, like, "Oh no, don't do that. Oh no, you're going to be fine. You'll do great. Blah, 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 blah. Who the fuck cares?" So they dive down in the harbor. They check for like this electrical issue that the chief mentioned. And then they find a shipwreck and they start exploring around a little bit. And then they come across a dead body, and it's the woman from the beginning of the movie. She was wearing a red dress, so I'm pretty sure that this is just the same person. So they keep searching around for a little bit, and then they finally resurface. And then later on, there's like a bunch of reporters and spectators around the docks kind of looking at everything. And then a woman from the mayor's office, Rachel, shows up and she asks Nick about like the dead bodies and what's up with them and who are they. But he doesn't know much, and he also just kind of gives like very vague answers, then asks like, why is the mayor so interested in this homicide or whatever. And it's because there's going to be some big 4th of July celebration. And we're doing Jaws. That's what we're doing. We're doing Jaws. There's going to be a big celebration. They're going to want to shut things down. The mayor's not going to want to fucking do it. That's what's going to happen throughout this movie. We already know that, basically. But anyways, after they send Rachel away, these two cops go looking around, and then Nick says he has a hunch when they come across this booze bottle that they found. They're like, "Oh, it's not just any booze bottle. We know exactly who this belongs to." So they start going into the sewer, and they come across this guy named Mad Dog. His real name is Francis, and they keep calling him Mad Dog, but he's like, "No, my name is Francis. Like, call me by my real name." And I'm like, yeah, that seems pretty fucking fair to me. And like in these tunnels, there's a bunch of other like homeless or unhoused people. One dude's playing the violin and like really fucking well too. I'm just like, damn, this guy should be in like Carnegie Hall or something. Like he's actually really good. But they start questioning this homeless man, and he was actually at the docks the night before. We actually see him watch these attacks go down or whatever, and he tries to tell them that it was some like giant sea monster, and then eventually spits out that it was an octopus. Now, neither Nick or Walter believe him. They smash his like TV and radio. I'm like, are these the two cops I'm supposed to be rooting for? Because they're both kind of dicks. I kind of don't care if either of them lives at this point. But yeah, so he tells them that they don't believe him, of course, and so they eventually just leave. It's now nighttime. We follow a tugboat driving along the harbor, and then suddenly it's like completely engulfed by the octopus. We get some like dodgy CGI at first, but then we see a lot of like practical tentacles attacking the crew and smashing windows and everything. And then it manages to like cause a fire, and it kills a few people, basically just choking them out. But again, all done with like practical tentacle effects, which I was very impressed with because we barely saw any of this in the first movie. And already the second movie is giving us like 2 or 3 kills like within the first 15 minutes at least, with a lot of practical work, and again, a lot of CGI work too, but it actually didn't look as bad as I thought it was going to. Like, so far, I'm actually a little impressed with the movie. Again, very cautiously optimistic, but still pretty impressed. But anyways, the octopus then just kind of slinks back down into the water, and this boat finally explodes from the fire that it caused. And they definitely do like a little bit of model work here, like it's just a little model boat that they end up blowing up, but again, so far this movie is just winning me over with all these like practical and cheesy effects. I'm like, this is kind of exactly what I wanted from the first movie, and they're sort of delivering on this one. The next day, the boat explosion is all over the news when Nick and Walter go into the police station, and then they ask the captain if they should go down there and check it out, but the chief has already sent someone over there because Nick and Walter weren't available. I'm assuming it's because they were in the sewers or something looking for homeless people. I don't fucking know. But of course, Nick thinks that like the chief just has it out for him since like he almost arrested a judge and like there was all that mix up or whatever. But anyways, Nick opens his locker and a bunch of ice and fish fall out, so all of the hilarious cops are bullying him and pranking him. Haha, hilarious, you dicks. So anyways, we go to the mayor's office, and the woman from the crime scene earlier, Rachel, is giving the mayor some paperwork, and then he tells her to go to the harbor precinct tomorrow because there seems to be a lot of trouble around the harbor recently. And then again, we get like just this like half-assed attempt to like get this woman to interact and be a part of the plot. And again, he's all concerned because the 4th of July celebrations might be interrupted, and like again, we're doing Jaws here. That's all we're doing. At the police station, Nick is watching videos of octopi, whatever. He's watching octopuses on video, and he takes the idea that an octopus killed these tourists to the chief, who thinks it's absolutely ridiculous. But Nick is like, yeah, but we had this storm a while ago from Nova Scotia, and it could have like washed the creature down this way. That explanation only makes sense if like sea creatures are like an already agreed upon fact, because otherwise that's like saying, oh, we have all these suspicious murders going on. Remember a few months ago there was a meteor crash? Probably aliens. Like, just the logic there doesn't make any sense. He's just like, yeah, there was a storm and now something's happening here. Whoa. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And the only thing that they have is Mad Dog or Francis telling saying that they were attacked by an octopus, which they didn't even believe him. So now all of a sudden he has to believe him. Like, there's no other evidence to base this off of. I mean, he's right, but he's not really basing it off of fucking anything. And as much as Nick tries to convince the captain or chief or whoever this fucking person is, he still doesn't believe him and asks him like where his brains are and if they've fallen out or whatever, because he's completely out of his mind. And then he says he's going to forget that they had this conversation to begin with and just go back and do your job or whatever. And then Rachel arrives at the police station and like reintroduces herself to Nick and Walter. And her last name is Starbird. I'm like, why? Like, I'm like, this is dumb. I'm like, because it's an aquatic movie, so we have to give them like aquatic names. I'm like, oh, good God. I would have preferred the Roy and Shaw reference from last week's movie, but yeah, her name is Rachel Starbird, so let that sink in. So she tells him that the mayor has sent her down there, again, just to make sure they have everything under control, since there's going to be a ton of boats in the water this weekend. And then they tell her that they think that, like, the tugboat had a faulty boiler, and that's why it exploded, and not going with Nick's theory that it was an octopus. And then later on, Nick and Walter are out on patrol in the harbor, and they respond to a call to appear nearby. And then meanwhile, we see Rachel chaperoning a bunch of children at a park or something, and then she helps this girl in a wheelchair plant an American flag in the dirt. I don't care about any of this, but it does sort of play into what happens later. But again, we didn't like ultimately really need this, but it's there in the movie as like fucking filler, I guess. And then it's nighttime now. Nick and Walter are talking about Walter's transfer, and he's trying to pick out a chair or something stupid like that. But Nick can't get like this octopus theory out of his head. But they spot a flare that goes off, and so they go to respond. They see a man on a dock, and he's like, yeah, my friend just went in the water, can't get him. So they tell him to like step back or whatever. So they both get in the water. Actually, Walter gears up and gets into the water, and he goes to look for the man. When he gets down there, he finds a shirt floating around, and then he sees the octopus, and it wraps a tentacle around him, starts squeezing, and then Nick is on the surface, like, completely oblivious to what's going on. But then Walter manages to, like, kind of hit the bottom of a dock, and Nick sort of looks around a little bit, like he hears it. But then eventually Walter kind of, like, breaks through the dock, and he's, like, screaming for help, and then he's pulled back down under. So Nick gets his mask on, and then he dives down, and he sees the octopus as well. And the octopus is, like, pulling on Walter, choking him out, and Nick does all that he can to try and save him, but he just doesn't manage to do it. And so he comes back to the surface, and the octopus has wrapped a tentacle around him, but he manages to break free. But then when he dives back down to try again to save Walter, we just see Walter being dragged away by the octopus and disappears. And the octopus also makes noises in this movie as well, but it's not like the last movie where it sounds like a distressed fucking dinosaur. It's got like these more bassy kind of tones to it, so it's not as annoying, and I'm not really as bothered by it because at least they tried to make it sound a little bit more menacing. Again, we don't really need it, but it's not as annoying as the last movie, so I kind of let this one slide. But anyways, Nick gets into like this construction loader and he like raises the bucket and then the octopus attaches itself to it. But then it like kind of defects the loader. And I'm like, I'm not really sure what Nick was trying to do here. Like maybe he was going to use the bucket to try and get Walter, but I'm like, you can't see underwater. I'm like, you're just going to be like grabbing at random shit down there. So I don't really know what his plan was, but yeah, eventually the octopus lets go. Again, no idea what Nick was trying to do here, but he gets out, and again, Walter's already been dragged away at this point. So we go to the next morning. It's July 1st. Happy Canada Day. And Nick is talking with the psychologist who's doing a Rorschach test with him, like the ink blots. And she's like, what do you see? What does this look like to you? And he's like, oh, you want me to say it looks like an octopus? Is that what you were trying to get out of me? And this whole time, the captain is there too. And I'm like, should this not be like a little bit more of a private conversation? Like, I understand that he's like his captain or whatever, but I kind of feel like during these psychological evaluations, there shouldn't be someone in command there. Like, this should be more of a private matter, but I don't know. Maybe this is just how they do things in New York City. I have no fucking idea. But after Nick freaks out, the captain tells the psychologist to leave, and then him and Nick kind of argue about it, but Nick says, like, I saw what I saw. I saw it with my own eyes, but the captain has decided to put somebody else on the case, and so, like, Nick should just go home. And then we kind of just see the octopus swimming around the harbor or whatever, and then we go back to Nick, and he's in the locker room, and he's opening up Walter's locker and kind of, like, taking his stuff out or whatever, and then Rachel walks in, and Nick, like, he just immediately starts giving her shit, like, oh, yeah, what are you doing here, trying to get me in trouble? And she's like, whoa, just came to say sorry and give my condolences, but whatever. And then he's like, oh, okay, no, I'm sorry. So he kind of apologizes for being a dick. And then, like, she apologizes for seeming like she keeps checking up on them and keeping tabs on them. But she's like, oh, the mayor's being difficult. He's worried about this 4th of July thing and blah, blah, blah. And that basically she's just doing her job. And then when Nick leaves the police station, he's hounded by reporters asking if his partner was killed by the East River Strangler or whatever. They've just given this name to this non-existent killer or whatever. And then he just gets mad and leaves. And then it's nighttime, and he's in the top of the Statue of Liberty. This is just a dream sequence. Like, immediately when this starts, you're like, well, it was just July 1st, and now all of a sudden it's like fireworks going off. So we already know right away that this is just a dream sequence. So we see fireworks going off, and then the octopus starts attacking the Statue of Liberty, and it's wrapping its tentacles all around it. Most of this was basically just really dodgy CGI, but it was kind of fun. It was kind of cool. I didn't mind it, but it ends up ripping the head off the Statue of Liberty, and like a bunch of people start falling out, and then we just get this god-awful like blue screen or green screen of Nick kind of falling. It actually really reminded me of the scene where Susan Backliny in Day of the Animals or Grizzly, I can't remember. I think it was Day of the Animals, but that whole sequence where like she is falling or whatever, and it just looks fucking awful. Same thing. It looks just as bad. And then obviously he wakes up like, yeah, duh, it's just a dream sequence. It's now July 2nd. Nick gets to work, and he's greeted by another officer, Tony, I think, and he says he wants to, like, bury the hatchet, and that he has a lead on the dead tourist case. And apparently someone has just used her credit card at a restaurant, so they go and visit the restaurant, and they get a receipt, and then they leave. I'm like, I don't really know why we did this, because, like, they didn't look at security footage or anything like that. They literally just grab the receipt and then just leave. And then they go to some sleazy hotel that's clearly being run as like a prostitution ring or something, because they're just like these scantily clad babes coming in and out of the fucking hotel. But they ask for the key to one of the rooms, so I guess they've tracked this credit card being registered at this hotel and what room it's in. But I'm like, why did we go to the restaurant? Like, what did we do that for? Again, I think that was just like some filler or something, because it added nothing, and it actually doesn't make any fucking sense. Because they did, like I said, they didn't check any security footage or anything like that. They're just like, yeah, it was used at this location, and now we have the receipt, so you can see what they fucking ate. Like, what was the point of this? Like, this was so dumb. But anyways, they get into the hotel room, and then out of the washroom comes Mad Dog. And so he gets arrested immediately, and already Nick is like, no, this guy didn't do it. I know who this is. He definitely didn't do this. So Nick goes and tells the captain that, again, Mad Dog didn't do this, but the captain says, like, oh, just let it rest. You found the guy. You got to win. And Nick's like, no, this isn't the right guy. And then the captain immediately goes out and makes a statement to reporters, and they're like, oh, is this the East River Killer? And he's like, that's the name you gave him. We didn't give him that name. But he's like, yeah, probably. I'm like, wow, great fucking police work. Like, maybe you could leave a more vague statement and say, like, you're looking at the evidence or something, instead of just being like, well, yeah, you said it, not me. Yeah, no, I'm going to wipe my hands clean of this. Fucking worst police chief ever. Maybe not the worst one ever, but he's pretty fucking terrible. And so Nick and this other officer, Tony, go to a bar where they meet Peyton, who's another, like, dive officer. And then Nick still insists that Mad Dog isn't the killer. And then they kind of make fun of him, like, oh, yeah, you think it's like a giant sea creature or something? And he's like, yeah, I do. And then he leaves. And then we see a cop searching the sewers, and he's attacked by a tentacle, just being slapped around a bit until it finally wraps around his neck and kills him. And then we see the octopus, like, slink back into the water, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, because we're supposed to be, like, in the sewers, so, like, seeing it outside sink into the water, the shots just don't really make any sense. But it looked kind of dope, because the octopus actually has, like, yellow glowing eyes, which I think is what they were trying to imply in the first movie, and then just didn't really do a good job at it. But this one, it looks kind of cool, actually, and they definitely had, like, some giant practical octopus effect, and again, it looked pretty good. I was pretty impressed. Next day, July 3rd, oh, we're almost there. Nick and Rachel are walking around, and he's telling her about octopus or octopi and how they're territorial, and that's probably why this thing is attacking and killing people, because it's like, yeah, this is where I live now, stay out of my fucking area, and that's why it's killing people. And she doesn't really believe him at first, but they keep going back and forth for a bit, and she doesn't know how she would even bring this up to the mayor, especially since Nick is already in the shithouse with them. But he eventually convinces her to at least try. And then we go back out on the water, and we see two people, the judge and this woman from the like, botched boat drug bust from earlier. And there's a diver underneath them going back into that freezer, and he retrieves a black bag full of cocaine. And then we go away from that, we go back with Rachel, and she goes to the mayor, and she tries to tell him what's going on, but he basically just brushes her off, and so she leaves. And then that night, she tells Nick what happened, and he's like, well, I appreciate you at least trying. And then they kind of get to know each other a little bit, and how she was a struggling artist before she got into, like, politics and helping the mayor or something. Who cares? I don't, but yeah, I guess we're just trying to build some character up here. But they don't really spend enough time doing this, so I'm just like, why even do this at all? Like, it doesn't matter, but yeah, whatever. And then they start looking out at the water, and Nick is like, yeah, you see that shape? Look, it's moving closer to the shore. Let's go and see what it is. So then they go into the sewer, because that's how you get closer to it, I guess. And then they find the body of the cop from earlier, and then a tentacle starts attacking Rachel. And Nick struggles, eventually frees her, and then they start to run as the tentacles start chasing them through this hallway. They get through a door and they close it behind them, but then the tentacles open it up and it just keeps going after them. And then they start climbing up a ladder, and then Nick is grabbed by the leg again, but then he starts shooting at it, and it eventually lets him go. And now most of this, like 75%, if not more, again, was just all practical effects, all kinds of, like, tentacles coming in, and I'm like, this is exactly what I wanted from the first movie, and they did it so much better in this movie, and way better than I was ever expecting. So again, already, this movie has really sold me on a lot of the things that they're doing, and I'm pretty impressed for the most part. Because again, this was like a straight to, like, DVD or, like, TV movie sort of thing, so, like, I really wasn't expecting the amount of practical work they've put into this so far, but it was pretty good. So right after this, Nick and Rachel go to the police captain, and then they all get on the phone with the mayor together, and then Rachel tells the mayor that it was an octopus that attacked them, and then he thinks it's a prank and he refuses to believe them. And then the captain tells the mayor that, like, Nick thinks this creature is responsible for all the deaths. And the captain says, like, I don't quite believe them, but I've seen enough damage and evidence to think that there's something going on. Maybe I don't know what it is, but there's definitely some reason to be worried. And he's at least ready to entertain the idea that there's something else going on. And then he's, like, obviously worried about the safety of tomorrow's events and whatnot. And then Nick says that they can get a Coast Guard down there to either, like, capture it or kill it with some boat that they have. But the mayor makes some more jokes, and then he agrees to, like, let Nick investigate all of this independently and then put another like patrol route or patrol shift on board, but no Coast Guard. So again, it's Jaws. We're just doing Jaws again, or Alligator, or Blades, or you get the idea. And then naturally, Rachel volunteers to help Nick, and the mayor's like, yeah, whatever, go for it. I'm like, she's basically just a civilian, so I don't really know why they would agree to this, but they're like, hey, this other person needs to be in the plot, so put her here. And then it's like, okay, there we go. And then we see Nick and Rachel go back to Rachel's place, and where we see all of her art that she's been working on, and Nick is very impressed with it. And then they do some bonding and a little bit of flirting, and then that's all we get from that. It was a little pointless. It made it seem like there was going to be some, like, romantic subplot in all of this, and, like, there just really wasn't. So I'm just like, I don't even know why we did this. Again, this scene just feels like more filler, or we're trying to care more about these two, but it doesn't really matter that much. And now it's the next day. It's July 4th. And a reporter is telling us about all the fireworks being set up at Liberty Island and what a big event it's going to be and blah, blah, blah. Nick and Rachel go and visit one of the forensic guys, and he's basically trying to help them figure out where this creature might be making its nest or lair. And they've only got 4 hours to find it, although I don't really know why. They're just going by, like, yeah, 4 hours until nighttime, because that's when the fireworks start. But I'm also like, there's probably going to be people around during the day too. And I feel like this thing has been attacking at day or night. I think it's mostly been at night for the most part, but still at the same time, like, this doesn't really matter. I'm like, you just need to find it as soon as possible. Why are you putting a time limit on this? So after all that nonsense, Nick and Rachel get out on the harbor. They go back into the sewers where they were attacked earlier. And then they collect some samples of, like, the octopus slime on the pipes, and they get, like, a chemical breakdown of it. And then they plan to give it to someone else to help figure out where the lair could be. I actually don't really know what we were doing here, because they already, like, knocked down some locations of where this could be, so I don't really know why they were doing this. More filler, I guess. But then Rachel also still has to deal with these children from earlier at some point, because she's, like, escorting this bus of students to do something. I don't really know what. They all have, like, different flags from different countries, and I guess they're going to go put them in the dirt. They're just, like, these little, like, 5-inch flag sticks. So I don't really know what we're doing here, but I guess it's an important part of the day, I suppose. So they separate, and then Nick and Tony respond to a call, and they find an abandoned boat, and it's the judge's boat from earlier. And they find the woman hiding inside the boat saying, it killed the judge, it killed him, blah, blah, blah. And then she tells them that there's another diver down there still. So they both get into the water, I guess leaving this victim/suspect on her own, and start looking around. I'm like, I don't know if that's proper procedure. I mean, if you think that she's a suspect in all of this, and even still a victim, like, why would you leave her by herself to, like, topside? I'm like, you should at least call for backup, maybe, or maybe only send one of you down. Like, I don't really know, but I feel like this wasn't the right way to do it. But again, whatever. I don't think this whole movie they've been following any sort of procedure. They're just kind of doing whatever they fucking feel like. But they eventually find the diver, and he is dead with all the cocaine on him. And then the octopus starts coming after them, and they reused some footage from the first movie, I think. Like, there's a few shots of the octopus going to attack people, and I'm pretty sure it's just the same CGI footage from the first movie. It wasn't that bad, and it was a pretty cheap way of doing it, I guess, so, like, I totally understand it. All of the other practical work that they've done, and will do in a little bit here, totally makes up for any of these, like, little instances, so I was perfectly fine with this. Because immediately after this, we see the dead diver going into a giant octopus mouth, which was all practical. They had like this giant practical like octopus mouth thing, which was incredible. And again, something I wish we'd seen in the first movie, but the fact that they even have it in here is pretty fantastic. But Nick and Tony manage to escape. They get into the boat and they start radioing the captain and Rachel. And he tells them he was right about everything. And he tells them like where the octopus's lair should be. And so they get back to the captain's office. They all get on the phone with the mayor again, who still like won't do shit about this. And he says like, "Oh, you guys have like 5 of the best divers and you got a bunch of ammo and whatnot. So yeah, they should be fine. No Coast Guard though." I'm like, oh my god, this is so dumb. So Nick and Tony and a bunch of other officers get out on the water and they get ready to search for the octopus. Rachel, meanwhile, is getting on the bus with all the kids, and I'm sure nothing bad is going to happen with this. Of course not. So then we go back with the divers. They get in the water and they start looking for the octopus's lair. And then this is also intercut with footage of the kids on the bus singing Old MacDonald Had a Farm for apparently hours. Like, somebody fucking shoot me. Because they're like, it was daytime when they started this, and then like the next shot where they're finally going into this tunnel, it's nighttime. I'm like, they've been singing the same song for hours. They do eventually start singing Row, Row Your Boat. So, they know 2 songs. Good for them. Back with the divers, the octopus attacks one of them in usual fashion just by strangling him and eventually kills him. And then one of the divers shoots an explosive at the octopus, and this causes a bunch of chaos. And so the kids on the bus and a few other cars are in the tunnel under the river, and the tunnel starts to cave in as the octopus is like slapping the tunnel around. And then it causes this old woman and her dog to crash, and another car to like flip over, and then everyone's trapped in this tunnel now. So the divers surface, and then Nick wishes Tony a happy 4th of July and tells him to go and get out of the water. I guess Tony was injured in some capacity. I don't really know how. I don't think he was the diver that was attacked, but anyways, he sends Tony to go back to the dock, and then Nick heads back down below. The octopus continues to slap the tunnel around while Nick attaches a bomb to it, and he manages to slip away from the tentacles and get out of the water, and the octopus fucking explodes. And I think they were using the same footage from the first movie, which was fine. Again, don't really care that much. But nobody topside notices this explosion. They're all just like too fascinated by the fireworks, so nobody notices a giant bomb going off in the fucking river, apparently. We go back inside the tunnel, and the bus driver and Rachel have gotten the old woman and her dog out of their car into the bus as the tunnel is starting to flood. So this movie is basically now like Daylight from like 1996. The first movie was like Crimson Tide 95. Yeah, let's up it 1 year and we're doing Daylight from 96. Again, the octopus is dead. I don't really need any of this, but I mean, here we are. And somehow Nick says he can hear people screaming, so he somehow hears the people in the tunnel, and then he tells Tony to call for backup. We go back into the tunnel. The bus is like surrounded by flames, and the windows are getting blown out. The tunnel is collapsing, and then Nick breaks through an air vent or something like that, and he starts having people get in, and then he tells Rachel to get the kids into the back of the bus. So far, just the old lady and the bus driver have gone through the air vent, but then one by one, they start getting the kids out and, going into the vent, climbing up this ladder. And they gotta swim under the water a little bit, but like it's nothing that bad. Could be much worse. Much worse. But they eventually get the kids and everyone else out. Big happy ending. There's one moment where like Nick is carrying this wheelchair kid, and we're like, oh, are they gonna make it? And yeah, they do, because of course they do. They're not gonna like kill the kids off in this movie. They don't have the balls to do that, but so they finally make it to the surface. Everybody's celebrating. But then we see this other octopus rise from the water, and then they just shoot it with an explosive and blow it up, no problem. I'm like, okay, was this necessary? Nope, but they did it anyways. So I guess there is the potential that there just could be more octopi, giant octopi out there. So were there 2 the whole time? I don't entirely know, because I'm positive they blew the first one up, because I'm pretty sure they used footage from the first movie of that octopus blowing up. So I guess there were just 2 octopus this whole time. But yeah, then basically after that, we roll credits. Well, shit, this movie blew any expectations I had out of the water, no pun intended. But we get a lot more practical effects. We don't focus on some dumb B plot that I don't care about. The acting's okay. It's not really anything to rave about. Like, there's no performances in here where I'm like, yeah, that was cool. It just, it was a like made for DVD kind of performance all around. But the practical effects were pretty damn good. We saw a lot more octopus. We actually saw like the giant octopus mouth that they had, the glowing yellow eyes and whatnot. That was really cool. We don't ever really get an explanation as to why this octopus is so big. Again, who cares? It doesn't really matter. They're just like, yep, there's a giant octopus. Here we are. And I mean, at the end of the day, this movie is as much a sequel to Octopus as Alligator 2 is to Alligator. They're basically just 2 completely unrelated films that share a very similar kind of plot. But this was done way better. This was so much better than the first movie. I'm giving it 3 stars. I gave the first one 1 star because it was a pretty big goddamn disappointment. This is getting 3. It's a massive improvement over the first one and just much more entertaining in a lot of ways. But yeah, that's pretty much all the thoughts I have on Octopus 2 River of Fear. I would actually recommend watching this one. You don't even need to see the first one. You don't need to know anything about the first one. You can just watch this one willy-nilly, and it doesn't matter. But for next week, so originally on Patreon, I was going to do Peter Benchley's The Beast, which is a Peter Benchley story about a giant octopus or a squid, maybe, some sort of tentacled creature. But it's a 2-part miniseries like Creature was. So instead, part 1 is going to be next week's episode, and then the following week will be part 2. So we're getting The Beast, Peter Benchley's The Beast on the main feed, and then over on Patreon, I'm going to be covering Tentacles, because that's just a blast of a movie, so I'm going to save that one for Patreon. But on the main feed, we're going to be talking about Peter Benchley's The Beast, and that starts next week. So I'll see you guys next time for even more Bucket of Chum.